Hello everybody, welcome to the latest episode of Games Up Podcast. My name is Cameron McCulloch-Keeble and I'm afraid you're just stuck with me this week, ironically because I'm ill, though I hopefully don't sound like it. I didn't want a particularly long edit and I didn't want to put Lewis through the hassle of dealing with an ill me, so it's just me. This week we're going to be talking about the problem with Sea of Thieves and my recently found love for the Overwatch League. There's no indie game of the week this week, I'm afraid, because I have been dedicated to playing Overwatch's brand new hero, Brigitte, so I didn't find time to play an indie game this week, and Lewis is not here, he's kind of our indie correspondent. So let's get into the news, or more the conversation. This episode's going to be a bit different. We're not going to have any lists, we're not going to have any news lists or news items. Instead, I want to have a bit of a conversation with you. And we're going to start with my recently found passion for the Overwatch League. I tried to get into esports a number of times. We talked about it years and years ago, back when the show was still in its infancy, about are esports the future of gaming? And at the time we said no, we didn't think so. Esports had their place in the gaming industry and they were going to grow a huge amount, but we didn't think they were strictly the future. Well, my mindset might have changed slightly. I still don't think they're the future, but I do think they're going to play a massive part in the industry going forward, and something that's convinced me of this is the Overwatch League. I've tried to get into esports a number of times, especially when a couple of years ago BBC Three streamed a major final of an esports championship. I believe it was either League of Legends or Dota 2. That to me marked what could have been a major turning point in the esports cycle. A major TV network outside of the US who tend to have big sports broadcasters like ESPN, for example, showing an esports tournament was a big thing, I thought, in the way that esports were going forward and the amount of people that were watching them. Although, things seem to have tapered off slightly. BBC Three have not, as far as I'm aware, broadcast a large finale like that, and esports have not seen, again outside of the US and other places with major sports broadcasters, any kind of live televised thing. What they have seen, though, is a huge pickup in viewership on streaming services. The Overwatch League, for example, when it started, saw an average concurrent viewership of 180,000 viewers. And that dropped off after the first week to more around the sort of 60, 70, 80,000 mark. But that's still a really, really high viewership, especially for an entirely online streaming-focused service. See, something like a television network can pick up people who aren't necessarily dedicated to that type of programming, people who are channel hopping or switching or trying to find something new, or people who have just got those channels for the first time. You would be surprised about how many people are still yet to explore the digital options on their TV, despite the fact that we've had Freeview as a standard in the UK for quite a few years now. But for something that's a dedicated streaming service, you have to get people who are dedicated to watching streaming. I think there's a couple of things that we're doing better recently that mean a better, brighter future for esports. And one of the first things is the actual viewership of it. See, when I've watched esports before, it was literally watching a video game. And that was great. I love video games, and I love playing them, and I love watching them, so watching them was great. But for people who aren't as into video games, but perhaps are more into sports or tournaments or esports, i.e. they don't necessarily get the same kick out of playing games that they do watching them, watching a video game can sometimes be difficult to understand, especially the more high-up strategic video games like Dota 2, League of Legends, for example, where there's a lot of forward planning that goes into the game. There's a lot of forward planning that goes into Overwatch, but it's a lot more minute-to-minute forward planning, understanding how this push is going to happen, understanding what your team's ults are like and how they're going to work together, where the strategy is. That is a lot more minute-to-minute. And so it can be a lot easier to watch when it's made easy and a lot harder to watch when it's made hard. One of the great things that I think Overwatch League gets really good is having team colours and making them incredibly clear to watch. Every team has a uniform, every team's user interface is in league with that uniform, i.e. the London Spitfires, my team for example, usually wear a blue uniform, so their UI is blue, or their attacks are blue, or their enemies' attacks are their enemies' colours. Now, I'm sure others have done it before, but Overwatch is the first, in my opinion, that's done it in a way that makes a lot of sense, and I kind of like that they've put those uniforms into the game so that you can support both in terms of your playing and your watching. Though a quick aside, next year, for the next Overwatch League, can we please have those skins bring the UI to the game as well? It would require a bit of relearning some stuff, but I'd absolutely kill to have a blue Moira Coalescence. Okay, back to the topic at hand. One of the games that's become a surprising hit in esports is Rocket League, and I think one of the main reasons for this is because Rocket League is so easy to understand. Where a game of football is a couple of people on a pitch in colours kicking a ball back and forth, Rocket League is much the same, just the people are cars and the ball is huge. The same reason that people enjoy watching football will be the same reason that people enjoy watching Rocket League and or the Overwatch League. So what can esports continue to do to go down this path? A. Making viewership more easy. Great commentators, great shoutcasters, great play breakdowns, and great understanding in the actual video game of colours, movements, drawn breakdowns of plays so that people can tell exactly what's happening minute to minute and exactly what's being planned in the future. I really think the Overwatch League has hit a great mix of all of those things, and I think it could catapult it to some great success in the future if Overwatch continues to be as successful as it has been. So that's my 2 cents on the Overwatch League. Are esports the future of video games? I'm still not entirely convinced. I think they will absolutely have their place in the industry, and I think that place is growing, but I don't think they're quite the future. Though one way they could start to be is by making the game and the league as welcoming to the viewership as it is to the hardcore players. Now, the second thing we need to talk about this week is Sea of Thieves, and I must say, it's not the most positive of talk. I've seen a lot of people this week saying that we should stop complaining about Sea of Thieves, that we should stop criticising it or asking who it's for because people are enjoying it and people are having fun. And that is incredibly laudable. The same thing was said about PlayerUnknown's when it first came out. And for those who enjoy it, it's a very fair criticism to say, the game is fun, what more do you want out of it? But there's a problem with Sea of Thieves, and I hope it's a problem that Microsoft have their eye on. More specifically, I hope it's a problem that Rare had their eye on before they released the game. See, the thing that confuses me about Sea of Thieves is whilst the concept of the game looks pretty great, and the moment-to-moment gameplay seems fairly well tweaked and pretty fun, and I've definitely seen some friends and some influencers and streamers and YouTubers enjoying it, the thing I haven't seen is a business model. Now that might sound incredibly boring, but think about it this way. When you pay for a full-priced story game, what you get is a full-price story game. I, for example, this week cannot wait to get my hands on Far Cry 5. And what I'm hoping to get out of that game when I buy it is an open-world story game in which I can go in, enjoy the story, and then play the after-game content at the end. But what I'm looking to get is a focused story experience with great minute-to-minute gameplay. When you buy a multiplayer game, what you tend to get is a game aimed at multiple people either playing together or online with a series of either objectives or smaller objective-based modes, i.e. PlayerUnknown's, where the entire point of the game is to survive, or Call of Duty, where the multiplayer modes are focused on smaller objectives like have the most kills or capture the most flags, for example. Then we have to consider MMOs, massively multiplayer online games. These games tend to be a slight mix of the two, smaller objective-based missions that tie into a larger story. So it might be go and meet this person, go and save this objective, go and talk to this individual or pick up this thing, but it ties into a larger narrative, and that narrative ties into a larger world that's populated by other players. The thing that confuses me about Sea of Thieves is it doesn't seem to be any of these things. It's definitely got multiplayer-like modes. The Skeleton Horde mode, endgame content, for example, seems to be a great example of this. It's definitely got MMO-like mechanics, meeting up with a crew, building your ship out, getting treasures, bringing it back, and then, spoilers if you haven't seen this bit in the game, though I imagine you have, the Kraken and avoiding or defeating it when it finds you. And it definitely seems to have some kind of story elements in that there are names to the islands, you can name your ship, you can build your own story, and you definitely go and interact with things on a one-to-one basis, much like you would do in a story mode, but it doesn't seem to fit into any of these brackets. Now, for the people who are having fun with it, that doesn't seem to be a problem. What I'm worried about is if it will be a problem in a week's time, or 2 weeks' time, or a month's time. See, if Sea of Thieves had been like the Elder Scrolls Online, a small subscription service or even free-to-play with microtransactions that would constantly fund more development of the game so that more could be added to the world, Sea of Thieves could have actually been a seriously unique, new kind of exclusive for Microsoft. An ongoing, evolving game made by one of the most talented and respected studios in video games, based all around owning a pirate crew in a multiplayer world, in a console that has huge online connectivity. That is a brilliant sales pitch. But it doesn't quite have it. At the minute, there's no promise of future content, although it has been said that it's coming. There's no mention as to what it is. There's no mention as to how it will fit into the current mechanics of the game, and there isn't mention about how it will add much variety to what's already a slightly struggling game in that sense. There's no dedicated story mode. There may well be islands with names, there may well be objectives you interact with on a one-to-one basis, but there's no start and end point. There's no narrative to follow. Now, there could well be. They could add this in, and it probably wouldn't be that difficult for them. Making it work with the multiplayer elements might be tough, but it's something that we've seen done, or at least attempted before with games like Titanfall, for example. Again, that would be actually quite impressive for Microsoft's console. A story-based multiplayer game set on one of the most online connected consoles of all time, where you play with your friends in a pirate-based story by, again, one of the most revered and appreciated games developers of all time. That's a very good pitch and a very, very good thing to sell to players. And again, if it were a strictly multiplayer game, lots of different modes and objective-based games for you and your friends to enjoy in your pirating adventures that are added to over time. All of these pitches individually make Sea of Thieves sound amazing. Unfortunately, the game that's come out seems to be a bit of a mishmash of all three and lacking a little bit of direction as to how it goes in the future. The big caveat to this, of course, is that Sea of Thieves is one of the few new IPs that Microsoft have managed to launch successfully, and the chances are that they're not going to leave it stranded, see what I did there, just yet. They probably are going to support it at least until E3, if not beyond, with new content drops, with big pushes on the Xbox store, maybe even big pushes in terms of the content they drop out so that people get into it. And with people playing it on Game Pass, it's likely to extend its life that little bit further because of the smaller cost of entry to it. I've been tempted a couple of times to pick up Game Pass and play it, and if I have, and I'm one of the biggest Sea of Thieves skeptics there is, I'm sure many other people have bitten the bullet there. I just worry that what could have been one of the most unique experiences and IP that Microsoft's launched in quite a while will struggle under the weight of its own lack of direction. Perhaps I'm wrong, and I hope I am. And if you're enjoying Sea of Thieves, I'm glad you are. I hope it's just as fun as the people who are telling me I shouldn't be criticising it, and I hope it's fun enough that you don't worry about what you'll get out of it in the future. But I'm yet to be convinced, so I hope Rare can do a good job of convincing myself and the quite a few other skeptics that I've seen out there in picking the game up at some point either now or in the future. Thanks for joining me for this week's episode of Games Up Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. It was slightly different to the stuff we've done before. Usually we have a bit more structure to these, but again, I'm ill, and this seemed kind of fun. If you liked it, please let us know by either liking to the show or subscribing to the show, whether you're on iTunes or YouTube, or joining us on Facebook or commenting below or on Twitter as well, all the social plugs that you're used to. We publish at 6:30 every Monday on YouTube and much, much earlier that day on iTunes, so you can catch it on your way to work. We'd appreciate any kind of support you feel like giving us because it helps us get out in front of a few more people, and we'd love that. Thanks very much. See you next week with a full cast again, and the game's up.